Hi and welcome to another video for wptoolkit.com. Today I want to take a look at site security as it's a massive and growing issue for any site owner. And if you're using WordPress, you're on the most targeted site platform there is, so you need to lock down your site to keep it safe from hackers today. By far the best plugin for this that I've found in the last decade or so that I've been a professional blogger is the iThemes Security Pro plugin. Now it is a paid plugin and costs $80 per year for just 2 sites or $150 per year for unlimited sites, but in a moment I'll tell you how you can get it for free. First, let's have a look through how this plugin makes it super easy to lock down your blog and keep those nasty hackers out. Once you've installed the plugin and clicked on the link for it in the menu on the left here, you'll get this first step screen. Now you should already have made a backup. I've covered this in a previous video for WP Toolkit, but if you haven't, then go ahead and make sure you have a backup first. That's always important when you're adding a new plugin and making changes to your blog. Now you then have the option to share your data anonymously to help improve the plugin if you want to. Then we have the one-click secure options, which will import and set up a whole bunch of default settings for you. Now I don't recommend this, partly because you won't know what's been done or how things work, and partly because if anything goes wrong, you won't know which step caused the problems, leaving you with even more problems. Okay, you can also hide the back-end settings, which we'll look at separately. So what I'm going to do is click on dismiss to dismiss this first start screen so that we can go through things and give you a better understanding of what the options are and how to use them. The first thing we have on the list is to temporarily whitelist your IP to make sure you don't get locked out. Now obviously if your ISP doesn't give you a fixed IP address, then this is of limited use, but it is worth doing it generally to make sure that your IP is whitelisted. As you can see, it's just done for 1 day. If you do ever manage to get yourself locked out, you can simply use FTP to get into your site and go to the plugins folder under the WordPress content folder, find the Security Pro folder and rename it to disable the plugin so you can get back in. Now as I scroll down the page, you'll notice there are lots of different things that the plugin recommends you fix, all given different levels of priority. You may have more high priority warnings than me, as I've already dealt with some of the standard issues previously, as you can see at the bottom there. And there's also a scoring system for how secure your folders are. However, what I'm going to do is go across to the settings tab and run through those that are the most important so that you have a better idea of what they're actually for. Now, one important note I want to make is that as you go through and make changes and updates, you should do them one by one, then save them and check your blog each time to see if anything has broken. That way, if anything goes wrong, you will know exactly which setting caused it and you can undo it and leave it out next time. And in the interest of keeping this video reasonably short, I'm not going to cover absolutely every setting or go into a lot of details. We do have more in-depth security tutorial videos in the wptoolkit.com membership area if you want to become a true blog security expert. Okay, so let's scroll down and see what we have in global settings. Now there are a whole bunch of different sections to the settings and you can actually jump to them from this little drop down menu here. But I'm going to go through them one by one. Oops, you can also hide them using that icon. If you're just getting that, just click on here and it reveals the whole lot. Okay, write to files. You may have had this as one of those blue boxes on that initial setup screen. You should have this ticked. You want Security Pro to be able to write to your files like your htaccess and your WP config file to make changes. Notification email for notifications. You can get quite a lot, so it might be better to go for a daily digest where you get just a summary of what's gone on for the day. Backup email. I actually use a separate backup plugin called Backup Buddy, so I don't actually need that in there. The error messages, the defaults are fine, but obviously you can play around with those if you want to explain to someone why they've been locked out, for instance, if they've tried to log in too many times and got it wrong. Enable blacklist repeat offender. This you want ticked, and the default settings are fine except for the lockout period. I tend to increase that from 15 minutes to several hours. So rather than 24 minutes. I'll actually go for 9.99 minutes. Or possibly longer, just to keep them locked out for a longer while if someone is being an idiot, you know, that you don't want them coming straight back and trying again in 5 or 10 minutes or something. Lockout whitelist, this is where you can again add your IP address. Again, if you've got a dynamic IP, then you may need to change that or update it on a regular basis. Email lockout notifications. It's probably worth having that switched on to start off with, but it can get irritating. It can fill up your inbox quite quickly, so you may find that you want to switch it off after a while. Log type, database only is fine. The days to keep the log for, I've reduced that to say 7 days, so the database overhead, the size of the database isn't so big. Path to the log files, so you can find them, you can change that if you need to. Allow iThemes to track the usage if you want to. You don't need that switched on. Disable file locking, you shouldn't need that switched on either. Override proxy detection, it's best to have that switched on unless you are using something like Varnish or Cloudflare or another proxy service. Then hide security menu admin bar, that's this little menu at the top here. That's entirely up to you as to whether you want it there or not. If you want to hide it, just tick the box. And then click on Save Changes. Remember, it's best to go through it, making changes one by one and then clicking on Save and checking your blog to make sure it hasn't broken anything. Okay, I'm going to scroll on down. You will notice on the right here that Go-To section is over here, so I can jump between different sections because there are quite a few, but we'll scroll down through them. 404 detection, unless you have any specific folders you need to add, you should be able to leave that as is, or any file types that you need to add, so that should be fine as it is. The away mode basically allows you to lock access to the dashboard for a specific period of time. For example, if you're going to go on holiday for a week or a couple of weeks and you know that nobody needs access to the dashboard, you can just lock it out while you're away. So again, it's an extra level of security. Banned users, I do recommend you tick the option for the Hack Repair Blacklist feature. That will help blacklist known offenders and hackers' IP addresses, so it can be very useful and it will cut down some of the problems you have. Banned hosts, you can see the IPs that have been banned. If there's any that you need to remove from that, you can just highlight them and delete them and then update by clicking on Save Changes. Brute force protection, you should have that enabled. You don't need to receive the email updates, but you want brute force protection enabled. And the settings are all fine, although again, the minutes to remember bad login, I would actually increase that to say something like, well, something bigger. So I'd say 999 to make it a bigger, a longer lockout period. Next we have file change detection, which is worth switching on. Just be aware you may get some false positives if you're using active plugins and software on your site that makes changes for you for updating things. Then you may get some false positives, so be aware of that. You can exclude file types and things like that to cut down that problem. Hide login area, that's hiding the usual login URL. Can be very useful, but you need to remember where that URL is. If you've got brute force protection enabled and are using good passwords, you shouldn't need it, but it is an extra layer of security if you want to use it. Just remember what that login URL is that you change it to. Malware scanning, you can scan for malware at any time you want to. SSL stuff, this stuff you shouldn't really fiddle with unless you know exactly what you're doing and you've got an SSL license. Most people won't be using that. Strong passwords, well worth having switched on to make sure that anybody using your site does use a good password. Then we have system tweaks. Protect system files is important. These are the default WP installation files like WP config file that hackers will look for and target, so make sure they are protected. Directory browsing, again, you want to tick that because you want to make sure that people can't go to one of your folders and check out the files in there. Again, hackers will use that to look for holes. Filter requests method. These are generally requests that you won't use. The only people that are likely to use them are hackers. So again, tick that box. Filter suspicious query strings. You can tick that, but it is something that may cause problems with some plugins, the functionality of some plugins. So it's one that I would generally recommend ticking, but do it separately and check your blog and make sure your plugins are all still working correctly. If plugins stop working after you've ticked this, then you may need to come back and untick it. Filter non-English characters. If you're using an English language blog, then you can go ahead and tick this. If you have non-English writers for your blog or something like that, then you may not want to tick that. Filter long URL strings. Usually I'd recommend ticking that one. It is again something that could potentially cause problems. So tick it, check your blog, your pages and your posts as well as your home page to make sure it's not broken in any way. You can switch it off if you need to, but it is generally worth having because hackers will use long strings to try and inject stuff into your database, nasty stuff. File writing permissions. This one I wouldn't actually recommend you ticking. It is good security, but it will usually cause problems with plugins. A lot of plugins, active plugins, will be trying to write things to your site to make changes and update things for you, depending on the plugin. So this is likely to cause more problems than it's actually worth having it ticked. Again, you can try it if you want to. Generally, I'd leave that unticked. Disable PHP in uploads. There's no real reason why PHP should be in your uploads and executable, so I'd highly recommend switching that one off. But again, you can test it, see if it affects any of your plugins. And once you're finished, click on Save Changes. Again, make sure you do these one by one and check to make sure none of them have broken your blog in any way. Okay, let's run through the last section, which is WordPress tweaks. First of all, remove the Windows Live Writer header. Yes, that's worth doing. Remove the RSD really simple discovery header. That is worth ticking as well. It's unlikely to cause you any problems unless you are using a service like Flickr. But again, it's something you probably want to test to make sure. Reduce comment spam. Yes, tick that. Cut down on the spam you get. Disable the file editor. You don't really want people editing your files, so worth ticking that as well. XML RPC. This generally you should have disabled or at least disable pingbacks, but it is something that could potentially affect your plugins. So test it out, make sure that your blog is still working and your plugins are still working. As I said, it might affect the functionality of some of your plugins, but it is worth having on. This one, multiple authentication, yes, you should block on that one as well. The jQuery, you want to click the icon here or click here to refresh it to find out which version of jQuery your site uses and follow the advice that it says. You may need to update and change your jQuery. Disable login error messages. I tend to leave that on. Generally, if people are getting locked out, then they can see why, so they've got a clue as to what's happened. Force users to choose a unique nickname. Yes, make sure that they're using something unique. And disable a user's author page if their post is 0. Yes, they don't need that, so tick that one as well. There is also an advanced section which we go through in detail in the advanced security tutorials in the WP Toolkit members area. Now hopefully by now you can see just how useful Security Pro is and why it is the plugin you should be using to lock down your WordPress blogs. And the good news is we've been able to take advantage of the licensing for iThemes Security Pro to include it in the WPToolkit.com membership. So our users get the latest version included in the membership at no extra cost. And that's just one of the dozens of premium plugins and hundreds of premium themes included, along with hundreds of tutorial videos covering all aspects of setting up and using WordPress, including advanced security measures such as malware scanning and the ultimate in login security, making it a true one-stop shop and resources membership for any WordPress blogger. Check it out for yourself when you get a moment to see how you can benefit from a WP Toolkit membership today. Thanks very much for watching.